You are listening to Season 3 of Transition Tales, hosted by Christina Herr. Listen to stories from the military community that inspire you to visualize your future and feel empowered to move through your own transitions in life. Welcome to Transition Tales, a Live with Courage podcast. I'm your host, Christina Herr. Our guest today is Army veteran Michael Martinez.
Yeah. Oh man, I think that's and so let's get through the deployment. Deployment was uneventful for me. It was what it was. I got to learn a few things. I got a second job when I was over there. That was really weird because I had an MBA and I was twiddling my thumbs a lot. And I said, hey, are we doing anything at night? And they're like, no. Okay. So I walked around and I happened to mention it to somebody and they're like, hey, do you want to teach? Like, I guess I could. I don't mind teaching. I had no clue what they were not asking me to do. It's like, all right, great. Here's paperwork for you to fill out. I was like, okay, fill out paperwork. Didn't say anything on there. I was applying for a job. And as I back it up, they didn't tell me I was applying for a job. I thought I was volunteering. So they're like, okay, great. Here you are. Okay, now you're gonna be paid $25 an hour for this many weeks. I was like, what? It's like, hold on a second, what? And I went back to the command. I was like, hey, is this okay? They're like, yeah, we're not doing anything at night. We're just, we just can make sure everything's ready to go every day. And so it was real cakewalk deployment for me. And so I ended up teaching for Central Texas College for a few months, and I was teaching the FAST class, so it was weird. Got back to Florida, and pretty much the only job that was there in the area was teaching or working at the hospital. I had my Security Plus certification at that time, but it expired probably the next year, I guess. So 2016, and I wasn't getting a job. I had a lot of education, a lot of training, so I couldn't find a job. And so I was like, you know what? Okay, I guess I'll start teaching then. So I went and knocked out their certifications for math teacher, computer science teacher, and K through 6 teacher. And I got those. I forget. I think they're called temporary teaching certificates in Florida. And I did that, and I got those certifications, and I started applying for teaching positions. And the funny thing is that the way Florida schools hire you, you have to be what they call a highly qualified teacher. Even though they have open positions, they cannot fill the position with somebody who just has a certificate. For me to be highly qualified, I needed 2 more certificates, and I needed some education. So I needed some university education for teaching. Just so fast forward, I finally landed a long-term sub position, and that was tough. And I learned that I didn't know how to teach. Holy cow! I learned that I didn't know how to teach, and it was really cool because all the other teachers were trying to help me. They were like, hey, yeah, this is what you're doing wrong. This is what you're doing wrong. I was like, oh, that's weird. And they were saying words like scaffolding. I had no idea what that word meant. I was like, yeah, that's stuff you put on the side of buildings so you can paint the really high places, right? No, it doesn't work that way. It's something else. And they would try to explain it to me, but they couldn't explain it to me. I don't know. Maybe it was Army me couldn't figure it out, right? I landed a teaching position the next year as a full-time teacher. And I started in November of that year. And when I got there, the principal said to me, he's like, Mr. Martinez, we're really glad you're here. And we did the whole interview process. And so he did a gut check on me. He's like, okay, I'm going to tell you what, I'm going to put you in the hardest class we have. I was like, okay, I'm interested. It's a job, right? That's what I'm thinking to myself. It's a job. And he's like, no, I need you to understand that I want to know if I hire you that you're going to stick around. I was like, look, man, I've been to war. I saw some things people shouldn't see. So you know what? What is it going to be? What are you going to throw at me? I don't know. So here's what was really crazy for me. And so I got into the classroom, I started teaching, and the other teacher was teaching me how to teach. And they knew that I had a lot of gaps in the whole teaching method, right? And I learned how to teach, and they taught me some things. I figured out, some of the things, man, I was breathing through a fire hose. I was studying all these books. I was trying to figure out what these words meant, like scaffolding. It took me forever to figure that one out. I'll tell you what. From November until April, it was in April I finally figured out what that word meant. So and they threw everything at me to try and make me a successful teacher, and man, they did everything. So I was like, holy cow. So anyways, come January, I'm in my own classroom and I'm doing my own thing, and I'm in charge of my classroom, and
crazy thing was that my unit had to schedule their AT, their 2-week drill, their 15 days a year. They scheduled it during the school year. Not only did they schedule it during the school year, they scheduled it during the testing.
Oh, wow.
Here I was. Yeah. So I was like, hey, so I talked to the unit and I was like, hey, is there a chance I can get out of this? They're like, no, not really. I'm sorry. You're really going to have to go. And part of it was because I knew what I was doing. And so they're like, yeah, you need to go. And I was like, okay. And what happened was come AT, I helped my kids and I was like, all right, we got to this point. I'm going to let y'all know right now. Everything you guys did was absolutely amazing. You guys have come so far. And they did. Those kids they did a whole lot of great stuff. And I had some of my kids in my class, they were doing things that they were like, they didn't understand. And I understand that, this is really tough for you guys, but we got to figure out how to do this lesson. Does anybody have any idea what's going on? Because me, I believe in whoever I'm teaching, whoever I'm mentoring, whoever I'm coaching. I believe that if they think about it, they got an answer. And that's been my pitfall on a lot of stuff. But and one of the things that they were teaching us as a teacher in the program, and this what was interesting is that I knew that this would work. I just didn't know how to make it work. Right. And this was not only in my teaching, but in my personal life, doing work, all this stuff. And this was really crazy, is that this is what really flipped things for me, I think, too, is that I learned that that when you are struggling with something, you need to go back to your basics. And it's really funny because the Army has a saying that I've been hearing, that I heard for a while, and they said, when all else fails, fall back on your training, right? When all else fails, fall back on your training. So I'm like, holy cow. And what they said is that, you need to start at the most basic. So so fast forward to April, I finally figured out what the scaffolding technique was. And I ended up getting my entire class. Now, give you an idea, again, my class was the hardest class in the school. It was. Nobody in my class was on grade level as far as education. Not one. Okay. And come April, I finally figured out the scaffolding thing, right? And I started out from the very basic, from what I knew every single student in my class knew. And I started with, okay, so everybody knows 1 + 1. And what I did is I actually had the entire class just spouting off by the end of the class, by the end of the 45 minutes, how to do a scientific notation. They would just, boom, get it done. And to be able to understand that. Now, these kids, they were struggling with exponents. They were struggling with the idea of multiplication. They were struggling with the idea of just moving the decimal and all this other stuff. But by the end of that class, within 45 minutes, even my level 1 students, which is the lowest students, the students that just never could grasp it and be enough to where they could put it on a test, even they understood it.
That's
and
awesome.
They were like, boom, I got the answer. Everybody had the answer. And I was like, holy cow, this is absolutely amazing. That's the day I realized what was going on. And it was really interesting. So I was like, all right, cool. I mean, this would be great. And but this is what happened. And this, I guess, somebody said, all right, time to close this door. So I go to AT and I get up there and I start working on with the systems and all the computer systems and everything, right? And what happened was they were coming to ask me questions about how to set up the systems. I was like, hold on, wait, you're all supposed to be training me how to do this. We're trying to learn how to use your stuff so we can use your stuff to do training on your stuff. So I ended up training a lot of people on how to use the systems. So that way we could get our mission accomplished, which was actually training the rest of the unit. So, I was just running around and I got promoted in 2017 finally to sergeant. So I was Sergeant Martinez running around the field, just getting everybody going and ready to go for this thing, and I was running around, going from compound to compound, and just getting everybody on board and making sure everybody knew what they were doing, and they did. It was great. In the commo world, your job, everything happens at the very beginning of the training exercise and at the very end of the training exercise. So you set everything up and make sure everything is working at the very beginning of the training exercise. You got 24-hour days. I mean, you might get a couple hours of sleep in the very beginning. Like the first 3 or 4 days, you get a couple hours of sleep at a time, and you get sleep when you can. And then the rest of the time, like for about a week and a half, you're just chilling. And then at the very end, you're packing everything up and making sure that everything's stored properly so that way it doesn't get broken, because commo, right, it breaks. But during that time, somebody had a heart-to-heart with me. He's like, look, man, hey, you're a teacher, right? It's like, yeah. Why aren't you in IT? I said, I don't know, man. And I guess I just don't have the qualifications for it. And they're like, but you really know what you're doing. I was like, yeah. It's like, man, why don't you just go ahead and go get those qualifications so that way you can go get a job? And I was like, I don't know, man. I've been trying so hard. It's, ever since 2011, and there it is, 2018. And I'm like, I don't know, man. I can't figure it out. And so he's like, no, look, man, you really need to get back into your element. And I was like, all right, I need to get into my element. And I made the decision out there. I was like, okay, I'm going to stop teaching. I'm going to get back into IT. And the other reason why I decided to get out of teaching was because, well, remember how I told you I was in the Army? Yeah, there was a lot of things that went under the radar. And I was really lucky, I guess. But I felt like that if I stayed in the classroom, I would do great. I would be excellent at my job. I figured out how to do it. And when my test scores came back, they were like, you did better than we thought you would do. I mean, we really thought you weren't doing well. We thought you were going to fail completely. And what they meant by that was that you have to have a certain number of students pass or get a good score to be able to be a successful teacher.
Right.
And they even called me back and said, hey, do you want to come back and teach for us? I was like, I'd love to, but I'm on the path to go back into IT. I'm sorry. And I told Kristen, I was like, look, no matter what happens, no matter how long it takes, I'm not going back into teaching. You need to keep me from doing that. And she says, okay, I'll do it. That's one thing that Kristen has always been there for me. Whenever she knew that I was doing the right thing, she would support me 100%. And she supported me 100% in my MBA. She supported me 100% in doing the deployments, so that way I could take care of the family and get us back on our feet. And then she supported me 100% when I started teaching. She supported me 100% when I was doing those extra long hours as a teacher. I mean, shoot, like I said, Kristen was my rock. All that.
That's a lot. Yeah.
This is where the story really gets really fun for me. This is the amazing part.
This is where you finally reach it. That's where you're.
Yeah, this is it.
Where you arrive.
Yes. So I get back and I close up school for May and I'm done and I'm like, okay. And what I learned as a teacher was pretty much what flipped the deck for me. What really let me know, hey, these are the cards I'm holding. And what the number one thing was, I was getting certifications. I mean, I would go and take a certification. It was easy. Teaching certification, good. I got an insurance salesman certification, and that stuff was tough. I mean, that was a lot of reading I had to do, but I figured it out. So I was like, okay. So I was still struggling, trying to figure out how to do this whole job search thing, right? And a guy, and funny thing is, I went to the movies with my son one night, and when we were leaving, one of his friend's dad was outside, and the kids were all hanging out, just still doing their silly things. So I was like, all right, cool. And I gave him my elevator pitch. He's like, what? That's what he said to me. He was like, what? Okay, what do you want to do? He's like, I have no clue what you want to do. I was like, what is this guy saying? So he drills me and he grills me for about an hour now. He's like convincing me. He's like, all right, so I found out what your problem is. I was like, okay, I didn't know that I had a problem, but all right, your problem is that you're not focused. I was like, yeah, I got ADD. Yeah, I'm definitely not focused. He's like, no. You're not focused on what you want. What do you want to do, man? What do you want to do? I was like, no, get an IT job. It's like,
IT is like,
yeah,
there's so much IT.
They're like, no, I'm really good at IT. I want to do IT. I'm just gonna get an IT job. And he's like, no, that's not good enough. Okay, tell me, what do you want to do? It's like, okay, fine. I guess I want to, I don't know, go into IT security. Oh no, you're still not telling me what you want to do. I had no clue.
Secure the IT.
Yeah, right. I had no clue. And it was funny because I'm doing everything IT. That's what the Army does to you, right? They're like, yeah, here, you're the only guy that knows how to do this stuff. So
Jack of all trades, a master of none.
Yeah. And they're like, yeah, and I mean, I was writing policies. I was doing everything, right? I was running the networks. I was running the servers. I was issuing accounts. I was making sure that we were following the Army regulation, and I was passing inspections like crazy with IT stuff. And I was like, yeah, I'm going to do IT. And he's like, okay, look, I'm going to tell you something. I'm just going to put it on you. And you choose what you want to do. You're going to choose what you're going to do, and you're going to choose what to say. So, and I said, okay. And he says, you want to be a CISO? I was like, hey, yeah, sure. I was like, SEESOH. I'm like, that sounds like a great thing. By the way, that's CCISO.
I actually knew that. And I'm not an IT person at all. But my brother is. My brother is. So like, I've seen it.
So I was like, yeah, that sounds great. Yeah. Go get your CISO. I was like, okay, yeah, whatever that means. And I don't know how Google knew that. I was trying to look up CCISO, but that's what I did. And I'm looking at it. I was like, okay, so to become a CISO, what do I got to do? So I got an MBA. I know all this stuff. I'm really comfortable with networking. Maybe I should work on networking. So I started studying my CCNA, and I started focusing. This is what I'm going to do. I'm going to become a network administrator, senior network administrator, ultimately with the goal of becoming a CISO. And so so I started working on my interview. Was that, how do I become a network admin? My job search, network admin, just network admin. This is it right here. I'm going to become a network admin. And let's see, my elevator pitch, boom, real solid. So that way I know exactly what I need to say, no matter what. And it kind of worked for me. So my interviews, they were still kind of crappy, and I was still struggling, but I was getting better. Holy cow, I was getting so much better. And then one day my friend calls me up here from here in Texas. He lives out in San Marcos. I'm in Florida. He said, hey, Mike, what are you doing? It's like, oh, studying for a job and looking for a job, see if I can get that job. It's like, oh, great. So, hey, you want to go to Vegas? It's like, no, Doug, I can't afford to go to Vegas. I'm looking for a job, and I'm studying so I can get that job. It's like, so you want to go to Vegas, huh? It's like, Doug, no. I'm looking for a job, and I'm studying so I can get that job. I don't have time to go to Vegas. I don't have the money. You're crazy. It's like, oh, all right. So you're going to Vegas. It's settled. I'm like, what? what? I don't. What are you saying? I was like, hold on a second. So I looked at Kristen and I was like, Kristen, Doug wants me to go to Vegas. She says, go. Okay. Doug, when are we going to Vegas? And he says, it was like end of July, beginning of August. So I ended up going to Vegas, and what it was that he got me into a program or into the convention called B-Sides, and he also wanted me to go to DEF CON as well. I was like, all right, great, cool. I'm going to spend a lot of money, and I don't know how I'm going to afford this, and pretty much tapping out. And I'm like, okay, we'll see what happens. I have no clue what's going to happen. I don't even know if I'm like, I'm just gonna do my elevator pitch. That's what I'm doing. So everywhere I go, everybody I talk to, here's my elevator pitch. Here's my elevator pitch, and everybody I talked to, didn't matter what they were doing or what for what reason I was talking to them. I always start out with, hey, my name's Michael Martinez, and I'm studying to become a CCNA, and I have a Security Plus, so I'm DoD IAT level 2 certified. And they're like, okay, great. And go to the resume workshop. They tell you, do this to your resume, do that to your resume. And there's a few key things that they did that everybody says now this is what you're supposed to do, put on your resumes, little specific things. Do you have a clearance? Do you have and number 2, do you have a DoD IA level, which is in the case of Security Plus is IAT level 2, and that pretty much that's the ticket. I meet a lady, her name is Kathleen Smith, and she's the reason why I'm at B-Sides. And she invited 2 veterans to come to B-Sides for free. I go to DEF CON, and that was pretty cool too. I was still breathing through a fire hose, learning. I was like, man, I got to take a day off. He's like, all right, cool. I took a day off from this convention stuff. It was absolutely amazing. And so we finished up at B-Sides, and Kathleen tells me, she says, all right, hey, Mike, because it was a job hiring event for veterans. Veterans were invited to it, and there was a particular veteran product track there was a high-speed deal going on. And and because we're like guest of honors, this other guy and myself. And so we go to this thing, and she says, okay, hey, Mike, I want you to stop in San Antonio on the way back to Florida. I'm like, yeah, I got a small layover, but I need to get back to Florida. I got a plane ticket. Sorry. He's like, oh, and she kind of did that,
Yeah.
You need to stop in San
Yeah.
Antonio. I'm like, okay, so what am I going to do in San Antonio? She says, so this is a job hiring event called CyberTexas. I want you to go to it. I'm like, okay. So that pretty much as soon as I was done talking to her, I'm like, okay, I'm going to figure out. I call up my wife. I'm like, hey, they want me to stop in San Antonio, go to a job fair. I rescheduled my flight for Monday, and then I got a notification from the National Guard. Hey, see you at drill. I was like, oh crap! I forgot I have drill this weekend.
Oh no!
So I called the airlines back and I say, hey, can y'all help me out? Like, nope, sorry. Like, oh man, seriously, I got drill this weekend. I can't afford this. They're like, okay, we'll work with you. So they knocked a little bit off of it, and then they kind of transferred a few of the funds and so on and so forth. They still got their money. And so I rescheduled the flight, and I go to CyberTexas. If I had gone earlier in the day, my mind would have still been reeling because there's a whole lot going on at CyberTexas too. Holy cow! But the job fair is where I got a lot of an amazing opportunity. And the 2 people that I met there, Samantha Domingo and Bernard B. He won't tell me his last name, so I'm not going to butcher it.
We know who you're talking about. Those of us that are in the San Antonio area.
Yeah, his name's Bernard. He doesn't let me say it. He doesn't say his last name to me, so I'm like, all right, fine. I'm gonna butcher it if I ever say it, so I'm not gonna say it. At least not on not on LinkedIn
Not a podcast.
or podcast. Yeah. So So Samantha hooks me up with an interview with Rackspace, and she's now with AWS, and she's absolutely amazing person. So, and she loves helping people. Holy cow, she loves helping people.
Yeah, she does.
And I get to Bernard, and I hand Bernard my resume, and it says at the top, I want to be a certified information security officer. And he looks at me. He's like, looks at my resume again. He looks at me again, and he's like, what if I told you you're not qualified for this job? And I was like, it's a good question. I'm thinking to myself, and I was like stumped. I was like, man, this is the question you should be able to answer if you're going for that kind of job, right? I was like, But he was great. He started talking to me about my resume and saying, hey, these are the things I see in there. He took a lot of time during this job fair. He was like, he could have talked to a whole lot of people, but he took time and he said, hey, these are things that I think I see on your resume, and it's like, okay, I would like for you to bring this out a little bit more, and so on and so forth, and which inspired me to write one of the articles I wrote right around that time, which I think that night I had wrote something about listening to the recruiters when you're talking to them.
Right.
I get back to Florida and I get called up for an interview with the company in Orlando, and that was when I learned what the value of how much I should be paid was, what I was worth. And the lady, she says, hey, I got a problem with your application. It's like, oh, dang it. I did get the job. That's what I'm thinking to myself. And she says to me, it's about your pay. I was like, oh, I'm asking for too much, ain't I? She says, so how much do you want? It's like, well, 45. She's like, yeah, would you like for me to help you out? I'm like, okay, go ahead. What's the number? She says, do you mind if I put 100 down? Like 100, huh? It's like, okay. You know what? No, that's not enough yet. How about 110? 110 sound good to you? I'm like, hey, sure. Go ahead. I'm not going to argue with you. That's a good amount of money. I'd be happy to make that much money. So fast forward to the interview with Rackspace, and Samantha, the Rackspace does a interview where you talk to the camera. Holy cow! I was like, man, what do I say to this thing? It's crazy. And I'm taking notes too at the same time on everything that I do crazy. And one of the things that I did, and this is one of the reasons why I solidified the whole idea of staying laser focused on a job that you want. Because one of the things that the questions that came up was, can you explain a situation where you had to deal with a security? Like you were responsible for security. Of course, and I mean, I have lots of examples with IT. But what did I pull out? When I was a medic, I was responsible for making sure I didn't lose controlled substances. And morphine, that's really important to IT, right? No. So I totally botched it. And I was like, man. And when I realized what I did, I was like, nah, the rest of the interview. Right. And at the same time, it was the first time I talked to a camera for an interview too. So I'm like, just like, I don't know. So totally, I prepared for it. I had all these note cards, but for some reason, that question I wasn't prepared for again. Here we are, and my boss, he says, hey, I got an opportunity for you. This is my National Guard boss. And he says, hey, Sergeant Martinez, I got an opportunity for you. I understand if you won't take it, but it's I'd really appreciate your help. I was like, well, what's up? He's like, hey, yeah, you want to be a temp tech? Hey, Kristen, while we're working on things, I'm going to take this job over in Orlando. It's an IT related position, so I can, plus up my resume with it. And she's like, okay. So during the week, I'm staying up there, and on the weekends, I'm coming home to try and wrap up on, and catch up on things that on the honey-do list. And so Hurricane Michael happens. That overnight Cat 1 to Cat 5 storm that wiped out Mexico Beach. Holy cow, it did. Man, it looked like a nuke went off.
I
That's how bad.
was on the other side of it. I was in Fort
Yeah.
Walton Beach.
Goodness gracious, man. And as we're doing our thing, and I get a call, and I'm like, man, who the heck is calling me out in the middle of a hurricane? Oh, whatever. I'm twiddling my thumbs when I answer the phone. I was like, hey, I'm gonna answer the phone, boss. He's like, all right, cool. So I answer the phone and say hello. He says, hey, is it Mike? I'm like, yeah. How can I help you? Say, are you looking for a job? I said, yeah, great. I'll call you back. Guy calls back a little bit later. He says, hey, Mike, do you know anything about SharePoint? It's like, hey, yeah. All right, I'll call you back. He calls me back and he says, all right, so tell me what you know about SharePoint. I'm like, hey, man, I'm out in the middle of a hurricane. I'm sorry. I really appreciate you giving me a call, and and he's like, oh, that's great. Fine. But I need you to tell me what you know about SharePoint. I'm like, okay, so here's the crazy thing. And this is probably the 100% reason why I am telling you, you have to stay focused in your job search. Have to stay focused. Choose one job that you have to go after, just one. So I was like, all right. So I'm piecing together my interview skills on the fly kind of thing. And I'm like, SharePoint. What does this guy want to know about SharePoint? Okay, so I say, well, you have a website and you build your website and you have documents and you put your documents in there and people go in there and they get information. And he's like, oh, that's great. All right, I'll call you back. And so he calls me up a little bit later that day and he says, hey, Mike, are you available for an interview? I'm like, all right, hold on a second. Who are you? He says, my name's Kevin, and I'm a recruiter, and I'm looking for, I'm trying to fill this position, a real hot position. I need to fill it. I was like, all right. Well, here's the problem. I'm in a hurricane right now. I'm doing hurricane duty. I'm out in the middle of a field right now. I can't do an interview. He says, oh, that's great. When can you do an interview? I was like, man, hey, what's your name again? Kevin. Oh, okay, Kevin. Thank you very much. Hey, let me call you back. I got your number on my phone. This is the number I can call you back. I tell him the number. So yeah, call me back. He clicks. He hangs up right there. Like, okay, great. Okay, so I call the guy back and I say, hey, I can do an interview. Maybe tomorrow, I guess, because we're really in the middle of a hurricane. I don't know what's going to happen. And he's like, all right, that's great. 10 o'clock tomorrow. Is that okay? It's like, all right, hey, boss, can I do an interview 10 o'clock tomorrow? He's like, yeah, we can do that. I was like, all right. And he says, hey, I need you to send me a resume. I'm like, oh, yeah. Oh, yeah. Can you do that? Yeah, I'm on my phone. I can do that. It says, okay, so you know how they tell you when you're interviewing for something, you have to put what's relevant at the top.
Right.
So I'm on my phone editing my resume, putting SharePoint at the top, and all the relevant experience that I had with SharePoint. So he's like, all right, and we do the interview, and he's mostly just talking to me just to talk to me during the interview. And I'm like, that's great. He's like, okay, I see you got this, and this. It looks good. Okay, look good. You got a clearance. Good. Okay, you got your security plus. Good. Okay, great. All right, this is a great interview, Mike. So I need to schedule an interview with the what do you call them? I don't know, the client, I guess. And I'm like, okay, you're kind of putting me on the spot here, man. I'm in the middle of a hurricane. He's like, don't worry about it. I got you. They really need you. I'm like, all right. Great. All right, Kevin, thanks. I appreciate it. He says, so when can you do an interview? I was like, okay, so I think this was Friday. I was like, okay, and I'm thinking, okay, we're going to do a movement here soon. And we're going to go back to our home station. There's no electricity where we're at. We're running off of generators. That's the only way I'm charging my phone and stuff like that. I'm like, let me get back to you. Say, I need you to get back to me as soon as possible. I'm like, all right, man, great. And so when I got to the interview, he went through my resume. He's like, all right, everything looks good, but I got one small problem on here. And here's the thing is, I don't think you have enough experience with SharePoint. was like, I understand. And but do you mind if I give you a little bit of information, or you mind if I say something about that? He's like, yeah, what do you got to say, Mike? It's like, well, I understand how you feel that I don't have a lot of experience. Many folks that have interviewed me have felt the same way, that I don't have a lot of that experience. But what they have found is my experience with the first engineer, where I was working for several years, and I was maintaining the SharePoint stack out there. And I then I was with the National Guard, and my responsibility was to get the equipment running. I was the guy that made this stuff work. And so I did this for this many years. And he's like, huh. Okay, can you give me a little bit more detail about that, like the time that you worked with this? And I was like, yeah, sure. So, and he's like, Mike, I'm really glad you said that to me. I was like, okay, sure, all right, I'm glad too. Thank you very much. This is a great interview. I really appreciate it, because I learned about my interview skills, and it was a great opportunity. And he's like, yeah, hey, so when can I'm gonna go ahead and do some stuff over here, and I'll let you know if what we can do. I was like, all right, great. So a couple hours later, Kevin calls me back. This is the recruiter. He says, Mike. I'm like, hey, Kevin, how's it going? Hey, I got some news for you. I got some news for you, Mike. I'm like, all right, what's the deal, man? I'm just thinking to myself, it's like 7 years, man. I've been looking for a job for 7 years. And I was like, I'll be lucky to get $45,000. And I'm like, this is in Texas. I'm not gonna really go there for $45,000. I don't know. It's an opportunity. We'll see what happens. And he says, all right, so you did your research on that? I was like, yeah, it's they pay SharePoint administrators $85,000. It's like, oh yeah, they do. It's like, okay, so that's your asking price. It's like, sure, I'm just gonna throw that out there. Great. 7 years, man. I don't know what's gonna happen.
Right.
Like, all right, great. I'm gonna give them that number, and I'll give you a call back. It's like, all right. So he calls me back and says, Mike, hey, he gives me another number. He says, hey, can you work with 78? I'm like, yeah, I guess I can. 78. Yeah, that'd be a great number. It's like, great. Are you sure about that? It's like, yeah. Hey, man, they really love you. They want you. They want you over there right now. And when can you be there? I'm like,
we're in the middle of a hurricane.
What? Yeah. It was like that. This was I think this was October 31st. I think it was Halloween. And he says it was 2 weeks before Veterans Day. That's and I go over to him. I'm like, look, hey, let me go find out. It's like, look, they really need you. They need you tomorrow. I'm like, I can't be there tomorrow, but let me call you back. You know how I've been dealing with gout, right?
Right.
And at this time, I still had no idea that I had gout. So I'm trying to pass my APFT. Now I was on profile, so I didn't get flagged. So I was on profile, and what happened was, so I was like, and that time I was part of what I was doing as a temp tech. I was, training. I was, getting myself in shape, and I was really doing it. It was tough because every once in a while my feet would swell up a little bit and so on and so forth, but I was eating clean. So I had 2 weeks left to pass my APFT, and I was still struggling. And so he's like, man, okay, yeah, you know what? 2 weeks, man, that's cutting it close. It's like, yeah. It's like, all right, so let's do it. So he starts working with me. He's been working with me already, but he starts working with me even more, like an active duty sergeant would do, right? Come the last possible day that I can do the APFT. I was like, so he says to me, are you ready? I was like, we'll see, man. I'm like this with my practice runs. I'm like really close. Okay, so we do the push-ups and sit-ups. That's easy for me. Easy enough for me. I can do push-ups and sit-ups all the time. It's the running that was always killing me. And I get out there, and I'm running, I'm just doing my thing. And he's looking at me. I'm like, I guess I didn't pass. I'm just gonna do this anyways. And he starts calling out the time. I'm like, what in the world? I'm like, no, that can't be the time. I came in really, I like shaved off almost a minute from my runtime. I was like, this is
Wow.
crazy. I did it. He's like, yeah, you did, man. You passed. I was like, holy cow, I passed. So I go in there and we get all of our paperwork done. And one day I out process IST back to Texas. So what happened is somehow on LinkedIn, you know how the networking algorithm works. Okay. I don't know how it works. We all don't, but it works somehow.
Right.
So I wrote that article about Bernard. And what it was is one of his connections read the article. And I can't remember who it was at the time, but he happened to be connected with Kevin Doggett on LinkedIn. So I'm like, man. And that's the other key to the whole job search thing is networking. I think Samantha and Ray and Quincy and Chuck had their first LinkedIn Mill City, and I just happened to be there, and I was telling somebody my story, and then I go to the next networking event that came around was the Bourbon and Brews, right? Remember that?
Yep.
And somebody was talking about my story. Here's my thing, okay? 7 years I've been looking for a job, right? And I'm like, you know what, recruiters, you know, they're just, you're just a number to a recruiter. But I found out that day that no, you're not a number to recruiters. They just got a mission. They got things. They gotta get their job done, and it's been absolutely amazing. And I finally got the opportunity to be able to say, you know what, I do know what I'm doing. I really, and I can, and all those 7 years of me, like, nobody's hiring me. Oh my God.
Well, this has been a really amazing conversation. I actually, in the middle of it, I kind of forgot we were on my podcast because I love talking with you, and you really captivate me with your story. So thank you for kind of taking me out of my own world and out of my own head with your story. I really appreciate it.
I appreciate it. Thank you. And thank you for, you shared your story with me in the past, and you do share your story on your podcast as well. And it helps me understand also what Kristen has to go through as well. And I still don't understand. I still have a lot to understand there too. So thank you very much. And
you're welcome.
Christina, you're doing a great thing. And I wish there was more I could do. And if there is something I can do, you know how to get a hold of me.
I do. Thank you. I hope you have a wonderful rest of your night.
Thank you so much.
All right. Bye.
Bye.